And we're live. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for another Stripe Dev Chats. My name is Cecil Phillip, and if you've been with us for most of the month, you may know that we've been dedicating this entire month to learning about Stripe Checkout, which, again, in my opinion, is one of the easiest ways for you to integrate checkout scenarios, payment processing scenarios inside of your web application. So what we're going to do today, we're going to do something a little bit different. Usually I'm hosting with like one of my teammates or something like that, but I was like, well, why don't we try something else? And why don't I be the guest today? Why don't I try and do some of the demoing and stuff like that? But for that to work, I think it was only fair that we bring on a guest host. So again, today's special because we're having our first guest host ever on Stripe Dev Chats. And so my friend here, Elahn, is here to kind of help us out. She's going to be helping us answer questions and interacting with some of you folks here in the chat. So let's give Elahn a warm welcome. And Elahn, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, since this is your first time on Stripe Dev Chats.
Oh my goodness, I never know how to answer that.
No pressure.
So hi guys. Yeah. My name is Elahn Danee. I have my own YouTube channel called Elahn Danee Codes, where I'm basically talking about my journey of learning how to code with .NET and C#. And I also have a .NET book study web series where basically I'm learning .NET concepts, but I have a co-host as well, and we're learning as a community for all the other code newbies as well. And then I also do interviews. I'm just doing what makes me happy and what I like to do. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us, for joining me and Mike. And then for those folks that don't know Mike, my friend here, Mike is my teammate and again another one of our co-hosts. Mike, why don't you say hi to everyone and what's going on, man? How you been?
Hey gang, how's it going? I'm doing well. I am happy to hang out today. Elahn, it's really nice to meet you. We were chatting before. Cecil and Elahn and I have something in common in that we're all .NET developers, although I'm probably the least experienced of the three of us of late because it's been a few years since I've really dived in any depth. So I'm really looking forward to playing around with some .NET and hearing about it today.
For sure. And I think what's going to be interesting for me is, I feel like all of us have like a different level of experience. So Mike, I know you played with .NET a little bit. Elahn, you're still learning, right? Like you're in the process of just kind of like understanding how this whole thing works.
Yes.
And for me, I've spent a lot of my time working on .NET projects. So my job today is if the both of you understand how everything works and it's completely clear to the both of you, my job is done and I could retire. And that's what we're doing today. So that's the goal.
That's the dream. I'm into it.
That's the goal. So before we actually start, what we like to do is kind of share a few highlights of things that have happened within the Stripe ecosystem, within the developer ecosystem. So I do have a couple of links that I want to share with folks. So we're going to do that super quick. And then we're going to kind of dive into the topic and talk about how do we actually implement Stripe Checkout into an ASP.NET application. Yeah, sounds good? Yeah?
That's great.
Let's do it. All right, so here's one of my screens really quickly. So like I mentioned earlier, in our conversation. So this entire month is going to be completely focused on Stripe Checkout. So, I think we started about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and, we'd had a lot of amazing folks come in and talk about, companies and, products that they've been building with Stripe Checkout. Last week, we had CJ and one of our PMs, CJ and Josh Ackerman come on to talk about the actual products and some of the new features we've added for SaaS companies, like the pricing table and like recurring and metered billing and some of those types of things. And we might see a little bit of that today. No promises, maybe. And today we're going to be talking about .NET and Stripe Checkout. And then next week, tell me if this is not like the most clickbaity title you've ever seen in your life. Running a 200,000 side hustle with Stripe Checkout. I think that's going to be an amazing conversation too. We have our friend Sean Wang, who is well known in the JavaScript open source community. And so definitely looking forward to chatting with him as well. So that's kind of what our outline looks like for the entire month of September. If folks are interested, definitely go, if you're watching us on YouTube, or if you're not, head over to our YouTube channel and make sure you check out some of our past episodes. And, you can also see some of these future ones that we're going to do, particularly next week and all the other things we have planned for like October and November and so on and so forth. So that's Stripe Checkout. One thing I wanted to highlight too. So I saw this yesterday, and I thought it'd be interesting for us to talk about really quick on the stream. So Mark Russinovich, and he's known for making a lot of security based type tools on Windows. He's built a lot of like Windows system internal type utilities and stuff like that. But he's now the CTO of Azure, which, as you can imagine, is no small job at all. And he's been making these statements for a while that C++/C should be deprecated, which for me I think is a very bold statement. But I think I kind of understand where he's coming from a little bit, right? Because it's more from a perspective of how can we write more secure code? How can we write less error-prone code, right? And if we have the tools to do so, then let's kind of leave behind some of the things that we used to do that weren't kind of taking us down that path. So this is a really interesting blog post. We kind of talks about it. I know everyone is probably going to have their own opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. If folks have comments or anything they want to say about it, definitely leave us a comment in the video, or let us know, send us a message in the chat, and we could kind of have a conversation about it. But I thought this was really interesting and something I wanted to share with folks.
Yeah, that's a bold and pretty provocative statement from Mark Russinovich there. I think the synopsis of his recommendation is to deprecate C and C++, I think in favor of Rust. And that really does come from a security perspective. It's a lot harder to have memory leak, security flaws, things like that, buffer overruns when you're writing in Rust as opposed to C and C++, which are notoriously difficult, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I know, at least in my circle of developer friends, like C and C++ is like the language everyone fears to touch, right? Because as powerful as it is, there's so many things that we can get wrong. And it's one of those languages too that if you write it across different platforms, you think about Android and iOS, you think about writing it on Windows, Linux, Mac, like there's so many different things to think about and consider. And I'm kind of just like, I kind of want the runtime to do that for me. Like, that's why I like .NET. .NET just figures it out and I don't have to think about it. And I can more so focus on like doing the things I like doing, like writing web applications. So this next post I want to share with everyone. So another one of our teammates, Matthew Ling, wrote this cool post about integration testing the payment element with Playwright. So the payment element is a collection, like one of the, some of the, I guess you can call them web components that we have at Stripe that just make it easier for you to collect customer data in a PCI compliant way. So like, how do I, collect addresses and credit card information and emails and all of these like shipping information and stuff like that? Like, how can we collect those in a compliant way? And so, with those being components, sometimes you want to do integration testing with tools like Selenium. Maybe folks have heard about Selenium. That kind of automates the, the clicking of the button and like, does the UI go and navigate to the places that we expect them to? Well, Playwright is another option for doing that. And so he's talking about now, how can we test the UI components using Playwright, right? And he's using JavaScript in this example. But again, I think this is a really cool overview and kind of deep dive into trying to understand like, how can we, build and, write tests for, our apps. So again, if you haven't seen this before, head over to dev.to/Stripe, because we have a little Stripe organization on dev.to where like a lot of our developer advocates write blog posts and, share things like that, which I think is really cool. So there we go. All right, last thing I'm going to share with folks before we dive into the topic. So I thought this was really cool. I saw this pop up on Twitter one day. So Laravel, for folks that don't know, is a PHP web framework. So if you write PHP, this is like, PHP's ASP.NET or PHP's Express if you're a JavaScript developer, right? And so they have a really interesting integration piece that this person goes through, showing how you can integrate Stripe inside of a Laravel application. So again, if you're writing web applications with Laravel and you want to plug some Stripe stuff into there, this would be a good example or a good blog post for you to kind of go through and check it out. Now, I haven't written PHP in a long time, so I am not the expert to like code review this and tell you if this makes sense or not. But again, if you're a PHP person and this is stuff that you're familiar with, definitely make sure you check out this blog post. And again, let us know what you think. Now, with that being said, I'm going to turn this screen off because we're going to be done with this for now. And I'll make sure I share the links and stuff like that inside of the chat for folks, and then we'll also try and make sure we put them in the description so that folks could refer to them later if they need to. Okay. That was a lot. Okay. So now I'm gonna hand it over to our host because I'm not on hosting duty, so I'm gonna take a step back and I'm gonna let you folks take over.
Awesome. So, okay, today is about checking out how we can integrate Stripe checkout with ASP.NET Core.
Yeah.
So, what exactly does Stripe checkout do?
So that's a perfect question. So Stripe checkout, I like to say it gives us like a Stripe hosted form for you to accept payments, right? So one of the things that's difficult with payments, right? You think about security, you think about again maintaining PCI compliance, right? And when you try and do some of those things, like it kind of puts some restrictions around like what your business can and can't do. And so what Stripe does is that it hosts a checkout form for you, and obviously it gives you options that you can customize it, but it hosts a form for you. So now the onus or the responsibility is not on your application now. So if you think about it, on your website, right? You know, ElahnSellsAmazingStuff.com, I can click on the button, right? And then you can give Stripe, because again, Stripe, you know, we do a lot of things through APIs. I can make an API call to Stripe and be like, hey, I want you to create a form for me and I want it to look this way, right? Like I want to collect email addresses. I want to collect shipping addresses. I want to use Apple Pay, Google Pay, bank accounts, credit cards. Like you give it some configuration information, it creates the form for you. And then what you get back in your API call is a URL. And so now you redirect your customer to that place. They can put in their credit card in a secure manner. It's not on your website. Again, this is on Stripe. And then now it redirects to your page where, you know, everything's been successful. It's great. And then we can kind of just move on with life. Right?
Okay. So would it be described almost a little bit similar to a microservice, like where it's just its own component?
You could look at that you can say yes or no. I think a microservice from the perspective of in the context of your entire app, like this will be one concern that it takes care of. But then you have to consider like from a Stripe perspective, this is a whole product, right? Like,
Yes,
this is a
of
whole
course.
product. It's a whole hosted service. Obviously, it's something that you pay for because you know Stripe's
Of
not free.
course, yes.
It's something that you pay for. But it does take care of a very particular concern in your app, which is how do I just collect the payments, right? So what I'm going to do is I have a little demo that I wrote, and what we're going to do is like step by step kind of go through what does it actually feel like for a .NET developer to kind of put some of this stuff together. I want to show you like the Stripe dashboard so you can see how I list out customers and products and prices and some of these types of things. And then depending on how much time we have left, I want to go through subscriptions. Because if you think about subscriptions as another way that you might want to accept money, right? Like, you know, if I sell a book, I set it one time. But if I want to join the book club, I probably want to pay monthly, right? And so like what do those different interaction models kind of look like when we think about accepting payments? Yeah.
Very interesting.
Okay. So I'm going to open up my other screen. I have so many screens. I'm going to open up this other screen. I'm going to show you the demo really quickly just to let you know what's happening. And then again, we're going to break it down into like pieces and see what it actually took to make this. Now, what we're looking at here is a Blazor WebAssembly app that's hosted with an ASP.NET Core backend, right? So that means that like all the UI stuff is happening in the browser. It's like all these listings that are here, these are all like quote unquote Blazor components, right? For folks that aren't familiar with Blazor, it's similar to like React or Angular or Svelte or whatever it is that you use for your front end, right? It's .NET running in the browser, but again, you know, it is being hosted in the ASP.NET backend. So this is my little app that what it does pretty much is that it allows us to subscribe to events. So let's say I'm a party promoter, or I don't know, maybe I have a building and I host events in my building, right? I have this listing where you can kind of come in, you can learn about what's going on, you can see the price of my events, and then you could like click the purchase button if I want you to purchase the thing. Now, notice here for me, it says log into purchase. Now, this for me kind of goes into a little bit of what I like to call like the payment workflow, right? Like what are the things that need to happen between you and your customer for you to start accepting payments, right? So some websites you might go to and they might not say log into purchase. They might let you go through all the way and you never have to log in, but you could just give them your credit card. And that's fine too. And that's something that you could do very easily. Of course, I like to do things the hard way. So I wanted to go through this route of actually creating a user And then after I create my user, I'm going to use that user account. So now I have some context of what this thing's associated with, right? So, all right, so let's go ahead and log in. Oh, but I don't have an account. Okay, so I should probably sign in, right? So what I'm doing here, for folks again that are familiar with .NET, I have this thing called an STS, a secure token server. And in my case, I'm using something called identity server. Now, essentially what I'm doing is I'm just saying, hey, I'm lazy and I don't want to handle usernames and passwords. I want someone else to do it for me, right? It's a similar thing like if I said log in with Facebook, log in with Google, log in with your Microsoft account or whatever the case is. Like somebody else is responsible for dealing with the usernames and passwords because I don't want to do it, right? Auth0, stuff like that. I see my buddy Will in here from Auth0. I definitely appreciate you coming and hanging out with us, Will. So quick shout out to the folks at Auth0. So I want to register, right? Let's click the registration button. So I'm going to put in my name, Cecil Phillip. Let's call this, what's this? Cecil Phillip at yahoo.com. I'm going to use that because the only thing I use my Yahoo account for is for spam. And then Cecil Test, right? That's going to be the name of my username. Now, notice I also have this button at the bottom that says Create Stripe Customer. What do y'all think that does? That's a trick question. Of course, y'all know what that does. Again, I'm thinking about like my payment workflow and like how this actually ties into Stripe, right? I'm going to click on this button. So what I'm saying here is not only do I want to create an account that I can log into, but as I'm creating the account, I want to associate this account that I'm creating somewhere else to my Stripe account, right? So again, as they check out stuff, as they pay for things, I can associate like those payments and purchases with a person. But again, if I log in with Google, if I log in with Facebook, if I log in with Auth0, they know nothing about Stripe, right? So like what I'm doing, and again, in my code, and I'll show you what the code looks like. In my backend, I'm saying, hey, if this user successfully created, go ahead and make an API call to Stripe to create a Stripe customer. And then now I'll have those two associated together. So again,
Oh, wow.
as I make purchases, I know who this is associated with. Again, you don't have to
That's
do it.
smart.
You don't have to do it this way. I'm showing you this way because again, I like doing things the hard way. But then two, I think again, a lot of the questions that we get is, hey, how can I associate my user in my user database to like Stripe, which is a different service and a different product and has nothing to do with, again, Facebook or Google or again, my local server that's running on my machine here. Knows nothing about each other. But I do want to have like some metadata that's going to associate those two together. So I could do some tracing and some querying and reporting. So now, okay, this customer is associated to this, well, the Stripe customer is associated to this user in my database.
Yeah, and the reason people tend to ask us that question too, probably worth pointing out why they need to do this, is on the other side, if you have someone who's bought something from you in the past and they say, hey, this is my email address, can you send me the receipt for this? I need to go submit it for an expense report, or I want a refund, or whatever the case may be. If you don't have those two things linked together, you can't tell Stripe to go send the right user a refund. You don't know who's who. And in this case, Stripe handles all of the invoicing and messaging. So when you submit a payment, when you complete a payment, Stripe will fire off an invoice to that person's inbox. And this sort of is the connective tissue between the two. There are a lot of other workflows that it'll enable too, but that's one of the sort of important and probably most common reasons people tend to ask us about that.
For sure. And again, and in addition to that, again, going back to our friends at Auth0, because we did have an episode about this where Will showed how to do this with Auth0 actions. So again, essentially it's like a callback, right? Like I sign into my Auth0 thing and unsuccessful user creation, I'm going to go ahead and create a Stripe account, right? Again, like that, again, this is not something that's specific to identity server, what I'm showing here. I'm just using identity server because I didn't want to have another service to sign up for and do stuff. And I know a lot of .NET folks use identity servers. So I think showing how to extend that might be an interesting conversation for us to have today. Okay. Yes. Anyway, enough talking. So let's click the button. Okay, so it's clicked. Notice I did not put in any password. That is by design. I'm going to put some stuff in here. I'm going to click login. And then, nope, don't save my password. Thank you, but I appreciate it. And then notice here at the top right side, I have now, says log out, right? So I could do that if I wanted to. But now what should have happened is that I should have a user in Stripe that's connected to this particular account. And actually, why don't we do this? I'm going to jump around a little bit. I hope y'all don't get mad at me for it. I want to show you, this is the Stripe dashboard. Now, if you've never been to Stripe before, this is almost like the default view of what you see when you log in, right? I have an account. This is a test account. Notice this is in test mode. Please do not write demos in anything other than test mode, because you'll be very mad when you start deleting your customers in live. Please do not do this in live mode. Please only write demos. Only write demos in test accounts in test mode. Please, I beg you. Okay. Now, what should have happened is if I click on customers, I should have a customer here. Great. See, Cecil Phillip, Yahoo, right? Again, I haven't spent any money. I haven't done anything. But notice just a little while ago, if you look at my clock, I'm on Eastern Standard Time. So this time may vary based on where you're looking. But as you can see, my customer is created. So again, I have my user account. I have my customer inside of Stripe. Okay, great. All right, let's come back here. I'll go back to home and let's go back to this app, right? Let's buy something. So let's see, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So Elahn, most of these are in California. So I don't know if you know any of these places. It looks like most of them are in San Francisco. Stripe's
I've never been there.
Stripe's headquarters is also in San Francisco, so there might be a little bit of bias there, maybe, but I digress. Let's click on the coffee thing and see what happens. Notice now this button has gone from login to tickets, right? Like, so I can buy the ticket now. This is the point now where I'm going to click the thing and it's going to send me over to Stripe, like I was telling you about. So now I'm going to go ahead and click this thing. What I'm hoping will happen, I'm crossing my fingers. I hope it works. Right now, notice it sent me over to a place where I could see my checkout form, right? So here's my little logo, San Francisco. Stripe Events is the name of my fake company, right? And then here, notice that it's pre-filled my email address for me. It does that because, again, I created that Stripe customer on the back end. And again, I'll show you how you connect it to this form, but pretty much, Charles is saying Yahoo. Yes, Charles, I have a Yahoo account. I have my Yahoo account only for demos. Charles, do not send me.
I saw Yahoo and I was like, wait a minute.
Charles, do not send me anything to my Yahoo account. Do not. I know it's you. Don't do it. Okay. So now notice how it's been connected to this this user, right? Because again, I have a Stripe account. I have a Stripe customer. And so now this customer, now my form knows about my customer. The thing I want you to pay most close attention to is if you look at the top here, I don't know if we can zoom into that or probably not, but like if you look at the top, notice this is no longer on localhost, right? This is on checkout.stripe.com. There's a hosted form, right? So that means that the collection of this information, this very sensitive information, which is my name, my address, my credit card, my bank account information, this is happening on Stripe servers, which is a PCI compliant environment for you to do this type of stuff on. That means that when callbacks happen or anything of the sort happens, it is not going to your server. It's not going to your web app. It's not going to your database. Like, you never touch it, right? This is going somewhere else, which again kind of removes the onus and some of the responsibility for you for even handling and storing that information, and kind of just gives it to Stripe, right? So Stripe will take on the responsibility of dealing with that for you. Great. So hopefully that makes sense. Okay, so here's some information. I'm going to put in as a shipping address. And again, remember, like I told you before, like this form that you're looking at is completely customizable. So what does that mean? That means that, like, here as an example, like I'm when collecting address, I don't have to collect the address. But again, the way that I set up the configuration, that's how it is. Also, we're selling tickets. I might want to send a ticket to you, or I might want to send you an email ticket. Again, however you want to do your business, completely up to you, but just showing you have the option of doing that, right? I'm going to say, what's my address? I'm going to say Microsoft. Let's see what the Microsoft address is. Oh, look at that. Now, another great thing about this form that I love about it is that if you notice, and it says suggestions powered by Google, it's using like that Google location, I think it's the location API or something of the sort, to autocomplete the address for you, which I think, again, like I think about saving time and keystrokes. Anything that saves me keystrokes, I love it. Big fan of it. So now I'm just going to click this. I'm really not sending anything to the Microsoft's address. Please do not. Please, no one not sending anything there. But again, as you can see, again, it'll help me to autocomplete it. This is not a real number. I'll put in a real number. I'll put in a relatively fake number, 22, right? So now, next thing that I think is really interesting is you notice here, there's a couple of things you can do. You can use either credit card or you can use US bank accounts, right? So if I wanted to, I can put in a card or I can put in a bank account. One of the things I love about checkout, and again, we're in test mode, I can use test institutions if I wanted to. And then I can also try out like these different scenarios, right? So, here's a bank account, here's a scheduled account. If we go to the Stripe docs, we even have test credit card accounts. So I have credit cards that would say insufficient funds or, credit card declined or whatever the case is. I don't want to do that. I'm going to use a credit card that works. So I'm going to do 42, 42, 42. I don't know why this number is 42, 42, 42. I did not make it up. It's just kind of the way the world is. I think we've asked that question a couple of times on the stream. Why is it 42? I don't know. I've heard like all kinds of stuff. I don't know why it is.
Because it looks nice.
Great book recommendations for you, Cecil. You're going to love them.
I don't know why it is. It's funny because if you do the PayPal stuff, I think their magic card number is 4242. So it's not a Stripe thing. I think it's just like a credit card testing standard. You know what I mean? Again, I don't
almost
know.
Almost like 555, like phone numbers.
Right. Yeah, it's like 555 when you watch movies and stuff, right? Like, just call it. It'll call somebody.
Yeah.
Right. Wherever it goes, it'll go. Okay. So there you go. So I'll fill out the form. This thing, I'll come back to this in a little bit, but this is like an interesting checkbox that I think is a little bit more special than we think it is. But we'll come back to that in a second. I just want to click this pay button. Zoom out, zoom out, zoom out. Right. I want to click this pay button and let's see what happens. Stop asking me this. No. What I should expect to happen, everything is green. Things are great. Notice now it's redirected to my website, right? Not only has it redirected to my website, it's redirected to my success page, right? And because it's redirected to my success page, I'm able to get some context about like what happened, right? So I know that I just bought this thing, right? So now here I'm able to say, hey, thanks for coming to the event. This is the thing that you bought, right? And then if you want to continue shopping, obviously you can do that. You can click on the thing and it'll take you back and it'll load the page. Okay. All right. So that's the demo. Let's take a look at some of the code that actually makes this do what it does, right? So I'm going to open JetBrains Writer. So JetBrains Writer is just like, the tool that I like to use for .NET things. You might have a thing that you like to use. This is just mine. Let's take a look. Okay, I think first let's take a look at Identity Server and the part that like connects those two users together, because I think that's an interesting thing to look at. Now, for my Identity Server, for folks that aren't familiar with Identity Server, again, it's like a STS type thing. Now, what I did with it here, I'm trying to find the page. When you install it, like it comes with like all these folders and stuff like that. And so all I did really was like I opened the index page. And I created my own custom login method, right? Again, I didn't write half of this code, but like for me, it's not about like, again, trying to write the whole thing. It's about, for me, just adding the pieces that are important. So when we post back, right, when I create that user, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm lying. That's the wrong one. This is the one I wanted. The register. I wanted the register one. Now on register, pretty much what I'm doing is like, hey, I'm going to check, is the form valid? Do I have everything I need to have? And then I'm creating a user in my database. In this case, I just happen to be using MongoDB, right? Like that's where I've decided to store my users, right? And again, in Identity Server, you could write whatever you want to write. You could put it on a file, you could put it in XML, you could put it in JSON. I chose to put my users inside of Mongo, right? But then after I've finished registering my user, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm actually going to like pretty much like kick off a message into a background process to say, hey, I want you to go ahead and create this Stripe account. So the question now might be, from an architectural perspective, why do I not do that inline? Or why do I kick that off to a background process? Now, my reasoning for me is, when you depend on like external systems, you might run into things called like transient errors. Transient errors meaning like, hey, the network might be down, your internet might be messed up. Bad things can happen, right? And so I might need to do retries. I might need to, spin for a little bit until like I've actually gotten a successful result. So what I've done is that instead of me doing it inline and pausing the accounts, because that's what would happen. I would be pausing my user experience until that account gets created in another system and then redirecting them back to the login page. I don't want that to happen. I want my user flow to be as smooth as possible. So as soon as the user's in the database, I'm going to kick you back to the login page. And then while you're at the login page, I'm in the backend and I'm spinning and I'm like, I'm going to try and create this thing for you. And hopefully by the time you log in, I should have it done, right? But again, bad things happen. And so for me, it's more architectural design about fault tolerance, right? Like in case bad things happen, I don't want to stop my user. I want them to keep going. Again, if you're using something like Auth0 actions or something like that, it's almost like a similar process, right? Like an event fires and things are going to run serverlessly in the background, but still you can log in and you can move around and you can do stuff until the rest of that process happens, right? So that's kind of what's happening there.
So Cecil,
yes,
is identity server considered a service?
So in this case, so it's like a service. So identity
Yeah.
server is like a token server. And you
Yes.
call it an STS, a secure token server. So it implements like OAuth. If you ever heard about OAuth, that allows you to like log in and then it gives you permissions and grants to like be able to do certain things in other systems. For me, I'm just using it as the place that I keep my identity. You know what I mean? Like, where do I keep my user information between that and MongoDB, right?
Mhm.
And so not only, it does more than just allow me to log into things. It can also give me permissions to call certain APIs, and I can set those
wow.
up. But for the sake of this demo, I'm just using it as a place to store user accounts. Again, very similar to like Okta, Auth0, ASP.NET Core Identity has a thing that does the same thing. I just didn't want to use it, but it does the same thing if you wanted to use that. Again, you have a lot of different options, right? But again, the sole purpose of this is for it to just store users for me. So is it a service? Yeah, it's technically a service. If you kind of think about what's running here, I have my web server that's running my Blazor app in the backend. Like it's one application, like one thing I'm going to deploy. And then my identity server is another thing that I'm going to deploy, right? So it's it's two different. See, it's a service from the perspective of its own process that's running somewhere else, right? And again, there's reasons for that, right? Like you might have multiple applications and multiple web servers all talking to that same identity server, right? And again, we could talk about scaling and how you want to, allocate your resources and stuff like that. But essentially, hey, now I can have, my mobile app can authenticate to that same identity server. My web app or my PWA. If I had a desktop app, like it can authenticate to that same identity server, and it's the same users, right? And it'll just kind of figure it out. Okay, so it goes off and it sends this notification pretty much, which goes and says, hey, create this customer. And as you can see what's inside the customer, first name, last name, email address, and I give it some roles. And the role is just customer in this perspective. Now let's look at the part that actually, what's my time? I got a little bit of time. Let's look at the part that actually shows this, right? This is a .NET background worker. If you folks are familiar with that, it just kind of spins in the background and it does work for you. It's like a background thread, but like on steroids. It's way better. Don't use background threads, use this. And so what this is doing is just sitting in the background and it's like, hey, tell me when there's stuff for me to do. And here you can see, I'm using the Stripe API, right? The customer service. Can I make this bigger? Does Control Plus work? I'm going to make this bigger. I think that's too small. Let's make this like 22, right? Just a little bit bigger, right?
Nice.
Looks good.
And so if you take a look at this API call that I'm making, right? So I'm going to try and read, again, I sent it a message. I'm going to read that message. And then I'm going to take that customer and I'm going to assign the API, the phone number, name, yada, yada, yada. I'm going to give it stuff, right, from the user that I created. And I'm going to create that Stripe customer. That's what you saw me create in the dashboard, right? So now now I have my user and my customer. And notice how in the metadata, right, I'm taking my customer ID. So this is the thing I generate in Mongo. And I'm associating it with my Stripe user account inside of the metadata. Now you can think about metadata as just like a bag of stuff. It's like a dictionary, right? It's just stuff that I'm going to send along with it. And then now you could query your metadata using our Stripe API again to find out, hey, give me the user whose ID is this, right? Give me the user whose email address is this, right? Like we can pull that information out of Stripe, which is really cool. Okay, that's the identity server part. Okay, let's take a look now at like the actual web application that makes a lot of this stuff work. So if we look at the backends, what do we got in here? This is here we go. This is what I want, right? So this is the ASP.NET Core backend that's hosting that Blazor application, right? And again, remember the Blazor application is running in the browser, and then this is like the host. It's like the web server, right? That's hosting that Blazor thing. And so you can see I have some logging set up, and I have the thing here. One of my favorite things about this, I created an extension for Stripe inside of this application. Right? And if folks are familiar with extension methods, essentially it's like me creating my own Stripe plugin for ASP.NET Core. And I can show you what that looks like super quick. We might make this a NuGet package. No promises, but maybe. We'll see what happens. So if I kind of scroll down here a little bit, you see what I'm doing is that I'm looking inside of my configuration, and I'm configuring my Stripe API. And then I'm also setting it up into dependency injection. So .NET folks are very familiar. Everything is dependency injection based. So what I'm doing here is that I'm creating an instance of the Stripe client, and I'm using that iStripe client as the implementing interface. And then I'm just like setting up some things I got from configuration. So you can see like, I'm setting up like there's a max retry, enable telemetry. There's a part here somewhere. I have my API key that's also in configuration. I'm not going to show you where it is, but just believe me that it's there. I have them in environment variables. I'm not going to put my things on screen. But essentially, I'm giving my Stripe API the information it needs to be able to do stuff, right? Now, my front end, again, my front end is not that interesting because all it's really doing is just like making API calls to the back end, right? We could talk about that in another stream, but like let's just focus on like the stuff that's happening here. So when the page loads the first time, right, like we're talking about, where'd it go? Where's my page? Where'd it go? Right, when this page loads, right, on first load, what it's doing is it's making a call to that backend API. It's going to load up those events, right? Where do these events come from? Well, believe it or not, if I go into Stripe, I have my events set up as different products. So here you can see I can click on this. I can see the set up the price, the name of my event, so on and so forth. I can check the details. I can upload pictures. I can give it a description. All of my stuff is inside of Stripe, right? So that's where I'm making the call to get that information from. Okay. So if we head back over to, sorry for the jumping around. If we head back over here, what I'm doing inside of this particular method is that now I'm using a different API, right? This time I'm using the Stripe price API. So I'm saying, hey, go into Stripe and give me the prices of all the products that you have, right? And then this Stripe options, I'm just pretty much just giving it like, I'm giving some options. So I want you to return like 40 items at a time because I might have thousands of items. I don't want you to return all of them. That'll be a little too much. But I could say, hey, I want 40 items at a time. I want products that are active and not like, deprecated or discontinued or anything of the sort. Like we can set those things up, right? Give me active products. And then here, I'm using a thing called an expand. What an expand does is say, hey, not only do I want you to give me the price, but give me the product associated to the price, right? Now, this part might be a little trippy because prices and products are different API resources, right? So if you just wanted to get prices, you can just get prices. If you want to get products, you can just get products. If you want to get the prices and the associated products, it's like making a SQL query and saying, return this join, inner join where ID is equal to ID, right? And then give me the product back. I'm like joining them together. And so instead of giving me one thing, you're going to give me the price and the product associated with it. Does that make sense?
It almost sounds like a filter.
It's more than a filter because now it's like if you just made this API call without the expand, you'd only get the object that represents the price. Okay. And you wouldn't get a lot of detail about the product that the price is for.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Okay.
By default, Stripe will give you the product ID would be in there. And when I say the product ID, the Stripe product ID, and not like your SKU number or anything like that. You'll get the Stripe product ID back, but you will not get back the actual like the shape of the object. You know what I mean? Which again is it's a nested object, right? So it has its own properties and methods and all these types of things inside of it. So I'm saying, hey, give me the price and then also give me the product that the price is associated with. And now after I get that back, notice I'm doing something that's called flattening. Flattening is not really a Stripe term. It's like you get an API response back, and I don't want to return everything. I just want to return some things, right? So now the things I'm returning are the price ID, the product name, and see, this is why I needed to do the expand, right? Because now I can go into the price and like product.name, right? The price does not have the name of the product. I need the product for the name of the product. So I got to do product.name, and I'm doing product.metadata, right? Like who's the host of this party? Who's the host of this event that I'm having, right? And then the unit amount is pretty much the price. And then product.images is, well, it's the image, right? It's the picture that shows on my UI, right? You can have more than one image if you want to for your product. You can imagine, I don't know, maybe I'm selling, I don't know, shoes or earrings or something like that, and I want to show different angles of the thing. I might have multiple. In my case, I only have one because, I'm not that fancy, right? I only have one image, and my one image shows for all of my things, so that's in there.
Cecil, can I ask you a question here?
Sure, shoot.
Yeah. So I sorry to interrupt, but I think there's something kind of subtle happening here that what you're doing in this flattening is you're creating like the exactly the right amount of information to pass to the web client. So to the browser of the person who's on this website, they're getting the price ID, the product ID, the name, the owner, user, unit amount, and images, rather than like everything else that was in the price and the product.
Yeah.
And in this, so we're in the Stripe events checkout.webhost project here. That's the web server, right? So this is something running on a server somewhere that will then choose the right amount of data to send over to the person browsing the web on your website, so that they're not getting a whole deluge of information that they don't need that's not necessarily useful in that UI. Is that right?
Yeah, that's essentially what it is. Because again, we want to think about just being efficient with sending information back, and then also to, you might have some information that might be a little sensitive. Like you don't want to share that with everyone. You ever hear when folks talk about like when you query your database, you don't send your primary key over in the request, right? Like there's some things that you kind of keep to yourself. Right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I'm just giving enough information. Again, this information is coming from Stripe, but it can come from your database. So if you wanted it to, I'm just getting enough information from Stripe and sending it back to the client so that it could render the page that I want to show you, right? So again, we have this page. I click the thing. Again, I'm using that same information. And I'm getting the price, right? And I'm getting the name here, and I'm getting this image here, and like all these types of things, right, are very specific to that particular one because I've sent that information over in that web response.
That's really cool. Yeah, probably also helpful for people on phones, right? I think something like 70% of all web traffic is people on phones nowadays, and if you're on a slow like 3G or LTE connection, you might not be able to handle more than the minimum amount of data too.
Yeah,
that's a good point. That's a good point. I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what happens when we show we show that main page, right? What happens when we hit tickets? Now this is the part where the Stripe checkout part gets really interesting. So I'm gonna move some of this out of the way. I'm gonna fold this code. Do we need this? No, we don't need this right now. And I have a endpoint called create checkout session. So when you're working with Stripe checkout, you create what's called a checkout session, right? Like that means that, hey, what are the things that you're buying? Like, what are the products that you're buying? And like, who's the customer, or maybe not, who's the optional customer that's associated with this checkout, right? So if I buy a thing, I have my own checkout session. Mike has his own checkout session. Elahn has her own checkout session, right? Again, also another reason why I wanted to make sure that I created my user so that I can associate it with a customer, right? I wanted to be able to do that. So what's important for the checkout session is, again, like we notice I'm giving it the price ID. I get the price ID because, again, I sent that information to the browser. And now the browser knows, okay, I know the price ID, the product ID. I know information about the thing you're trying to buy. I'm assuming everything is one because I'm just assuming you're buying one of all my events. But you could change it. If folks want to send me a PR to do multiple, totally fine. I'll share. I will share the link for the code, and y'all could send me all the pull requests you want. Definitely appreciate it. But again, the important part here is that I'm creating a checkout session. These are the line items, right? Notice that this is an array. I can have one or many things that I want to buy, right? And Stripe will do the math for you to figure out, like, what it costs, if there's coupon codes, if there's discounts. like it'll do all that for you. It'll figure it out, right? It'll do the math and it'll do the calculation. The mode here that's important, I'm doing payment, and technically what this is doing is allow me to do a one-time payment. Means I'm only going to charge your credit card once for all the items that are inside of this line item section, right? So again, this is not a subscription. If it was a subscription, I'd charge you more than one time. But because it's not, I just want to charge you once for these things that are here. Here you go. You can see I see consent collection. This is the part where I was talking to you about like how we can customize the form. Notice here I'm doing phone number collection, address collection. If I turn these off, right, and I went back to my form, let's click this really quick. If I turned these off and I went back to my form, this section and this section would not be here.
Oh, wow.
Right? Like those fields in the form would just not render for you, right? But again, programmatically, I could do that because, in the API, it's almost like designed by API, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? Like I create some options, I set some properties, and now the UI looks like how I want it to look. It's almost like using feature flags. If folks are familiar with feature flags, right? Turn this on and now different things show for you.
Yeah, it's super configurable. So you don't need to ask for more than what you need. You can enable
That's awesome.
payment methods that you want, or currencies that you want, or collect shipping information, all that. It's top to bottom. You can make it kind of do anything that you might need.
Yeah, precisely. Exactly. And now the last two parts here that I think are super interesting right here. Now I have a success URL and a cancel URL. So remember when I generate this URL using Stripe Checkout, it's going to create a URL for me. And it's going to send me to Stripe's checkout session on their machines. But then on success or on failed, checkout, I need to know where to send you back, right? So where are you going back? Obviously, we don't want you to stay in Stripe. Well, we would love for you to stay in Stripe, but we want you to go back to the website so you can continue buying stuff, right?
Yes.
And so using some .NET isms, I mean, if you're using Ruby or Python or whatever, you have your own way of doing it. Here, what I'm doing is I'm just using my request and I'm getting the scheme and the host. So the scheme is just HTTP, right? And then the host would be, I don't know, what is this thing? Localhost 5276 or something like that. Whatever my local host is, right? So now I'm saying on success, I want you to go to my base URL /success because I have a success page, right? And if it's canceled, then I'm just going to send you to the base URL, which is just going to show you the page with all the products. So I'm going to say, oh, sorry. Hope you come back and buy some stuff. Right? That's the basic stuff. Now, the part where I start to associate the customer is really interesting. So again, I create these options. I call them session creation options because I'm going to pass those options to the creation API. I haven't done it yet. But just before, I'm going to check here. And this is the .NET way of checking to see, hey, is my user authenticated or not? Right? Based on how my UI is, you shouldn't be able to get in here if you're not authenticated. But, bad things happen. So on my API side, on my front end and my back end, I'm checking to make sure that you're actually authenticated, right? We got to check in both places. So in my back end, I'm going to say, hey, is this user authenticated? If they are, I'm going to go into the claims. Claims are like a dictionary of stuff that you have, right? And a part of my claim is that you're a Stripe customer. Yeah. Now, you remember I showed you on the other side how like I created the thing and then I had them merged inside of my identity server. Well, this is how now that I'm authenticated, I'm going to use that information from my identity server, which again comes back as a set of claims. And I'm going to say, hey, is this person a Stripe customer? If they are a Stripe customer, then I want you to take that Stripe ID, the Stripe customer ID, not my ID from my database, the one that's in outer space in Stripe. And I want you to associate that with the form, right? So now that's why when I come back here and I click on the form, it already knows who I am because I registered my user and my Stripe account with Cecil Phillip at yahoo.com, right? And so now it knows, it knows who I am, right? It knows where things are. And so that's how we can do it here from a .NET perspective. And now here's the part where we actually call that session create service, right? So all we've done so far is just like set up options, right? Now we actually want to create the session. So we make the API call and it goes into outer space, gives us a URL back. And then now I could redirect my user to that, to that page, right? And now they could, go to the checkout experience. They can buy it or not. They can enter their credit card information or not. And then, hopefully we make some money and good things happen. So that's the flow so far for just doing regular payments. I want to show you one more last thing. I know we're running low on time, but I did want to show you this part because I think it's super interesting. And I did it too because my teammate CJ, he was here last week and he showed off subscriptions. And I'm like, I have to show subscriptions. If not, he'd win, and I don't want him to win. So let me show you
he's
how
watching too.
I'm sure he's watching. Hi, CJ. So this is how subscriptions work. Again, you think about, you have a business and you might have, I know subscription boxes were a big thing during the pandemic where, folks would pay money and like little boxes of random stuff would show up. Or, if folks use services that like, what are those called? Like your personal shopper, like you pay money every month and clothes just magically show up to your door kind of thing.
That sounds beautiful.
I mean, you pay for it, but again, like someone else is doing the shopping for you, or maybe you have a grocery subscription to get fresh vegetables every month or every 2 weeks, whatever your cycle happens to be, right? Like these are subscription services, and so now we think about your payment workflow. How can I design my payment workflow around subscriptions? We've seen one-time payments. Now let's see how we do it with subscriptions. So I added this subscribe button because super talented with the names and stuff. And sometimes this freaks out. Let me see. Am I not running anymore? What's going on? Okay, well, usually what would happen is that I'm using a thing called the let's I'm going to stop this. There we go. Is this still running? I'm going to run this again.
In the meantime, Cecil, I wanted to ask, so the fact that we are integrating this, is this something new? Like when it comes to ASP.NET Core, is Stripe new to ASP.NET Core?
No, Stripe is nothing new at all. I mean, and Stripe also is not specific to ASP.NET Core.
Okay.
Stripe is just I don't know why this is not working. All right, let's pretend this is working. So Stripe is really just a service that you could use to add on to your to any application that you're building, right? So you're building iOS applications, you're building, Python, JavaScript, whatever, like you can use Stripe. And so Stripe is really, I'm oversimplifying this, but Stripe is really an API that allows you to create these types of experiences, right? So you make these API calls and I create a checkout form for you. You make these API calls, I can create products and customers for you, right? Like make these API calls and we can, query for different products and all these types of stuff. Now, one of the really interesting ways that you can kind of dive some more deeply into this, like I'm going to head over to the Stripe docs, right? Stripe.com/docs. If folks are really interested in learning some more about how to do stuff, one of the places I like to tell them to do is come to the docs. You can hit this little checkout button. And if you're new, what's really cool here is that I can come and select one of these options. Let's say I wanted to do like the quick start. I think the quick start is really cool because here you notice I can actually click through and it writes the code for me. Like who doesn't want to do that, right? Now here I can select my product. Like these are all products that are inside of my account already, right? These are not Stripe's products. These are my products, right? So I can select my products. Notice as I select my products, it's adding it to the code for me. Again, and I could come through and I could do a lot of different things here, but then I can download it. And now as I download it, I'll have the opportunity to start like run the demo, but using my products that are inside of Stripe, which I think is really amazing.
Okay, so it's compatible with different frameworks then.
Yeah, for sure. You can, again, anything that could speak HTTP, you could use with Stripe. I think that's fair game. Now, one of the pieces that I think is also really cool for you to check out that I didn't get a chance to show, but we're running a little bit low on time and things happen, is if you come here to the docs and you look at the subscription section, there's also a section where you can talk about creating subscriptions with Stripe. And as you can see here, like you can come here, you can add a product if you wanted to. You can create like different pricing models. Like, so how often do I want someone to subscribe? Is it monthly? Is it weekly? Is it yearly? What does that look like? And then you can even have this thing, you can try this out. This is really cool. This is called the pricing table. And it's probably one of my new favorite things that I was trying to show, but didn't want to load. But essentially what this does is that it allows you to list your products that have subscription modeling in them, right? So like, and I'll show you what this looks like. If you go into your Stripe dashboard and you create products that have a price based on, like, again, recurrence, like monthly, yearly, whatever the case is, I can literally come in and I can add them to the Stripe table, to this pricing table, and it just creates the UI for me. It's fantastic because I hate doing UI. And it'll just do it for me, which I think is fantastic.
Cecil, I've got a working table I can share out real quick if you want to see it.
Oh, can you? Okay, sure. Let's do it.
Yeah, for sure. Let's do that. You should be able to see that now. This is a quick one I made this morning. I was actually making some noise on Twitter about it.
Oh, nice.
But so the long and short of this is, if I show you just the HTML code, literally all you're doing to create this is embedding a couple of lines in your HTML. So a JavaScript snippet and a custom bit of markup that we include for you. You copy this from your dashboard after configuring it, and it creates a UI for you that's a browser-safe UI that works anywhere you can browse the web. So anyone, any page where you can embed this script and this tag, you'll see this, and you can configure this to your heart's content. So I added 3 products here: a basic subscription, a plus subscription, a pro subscription. You can add lists of features to them. You can customize the way these things look, so you can change the colors and fonts and things like that.
Fun.
Add images. You can add as many or as few as you want, so you don't need to have 3 of each. You can switch over to a yearly plan if you wanted to show the difference between pricing there, if you want to give discounts for yearly plans. And just like the checkout process, this will then, on an entirely Stripe hosted thing, let you complete a purchase for the product of your choosing. It's super flexible. It's responsive. This will work on mobile devices, which I think I can probably show here as well. And it is really a snap to set up. It only takes a few minutes to do this.
Awesome. Yeah, I love the pricing table. And one of the things too that I think is really cool is that, like, you know, it supports, like, just like Stripe checkout, it supports different locales and different currencies. So, you know, we're all in the United States, at least the 3 of us here that are on the stream. I mean, if I wanted to use euros, if I wanted to use, again, like pesos or whatever the case is, right? Like if I wanted to use francs or anything of the sort, right? Like we support a lot of different countries with a lot of different, like, you know, locales and languages and payment methods. So, you know, you have the option to use Stripe checkout, use the pricing table with some of these. Actually, no, I think the pricing table is the pricing table available outside of US, Mike? Do you know?
That's a good question. I'll have to check. It was the no-code version of the pricing table was only recently pulled out of beta. So I'll check and I'll drop a link in the chat to the docs here. Okay.
I don't know if it's available outside of the US, but if it is, great, fantastic. If not, the rest of Stripe checkout is, and you could try it out, you could use it, and let us know what you think about it. But folks, thank you, man. I think we're pretty much at time right now, but thank you all that are still here and hanging out with us. Definitely appreciate it. I am going to share with you all the code, or at least the GitHub repo that has the code. And like I said, like, pull requests are welcome, as always. And I'm going to drop this in the chat for folks super quick. There you go. You know what? Why don't I even put it on the screen? Let's see if I still know how to use, like, this mouse. I'm going to put it up on the screen super quick. If folks are interested to go and see the sample, it's on my Stripe GitHub account, not my Cecil GitHub account, my Cecil Phillip Stripe GitHub account. And again, you can see different versions of that app that I built. I have one using Dapper for folks that like Dapper. We could talk about that at another point. Some other things I didn't get to talk about inside of here are how to handle things like webhooks. Maybe we can come back another day. We could talk about some more about webhooks. I know someone was in the chat asking about webhooks. I am sorry, we didn't get to. We're gonna do it the next time. I promise you. I swear. And again, like, just tons of other cool stuff that we could do with Stripe. So hopefully y'all enjoyed it. If you did, let us know in the chat. Give the video a thumbs up, or, you know, if you didn't like it, then DM me and we can have an outside conversation about it. And yeah, thank you, folks.
Yeah, thanks so much. Thanks, Elahn.
I'm so happy to be here. So thanks for having me.
Sure. All right, folks. Well, everyone take care, and we will see you all next time.
See you next time.
Bye.